Greg Palcott, back to you as the results come in. Thanks, Greg. Liz has a little more.
That's right. For more insight, let's bring in Nile Gardiner, director of the Margaret Thatcher Center for Freedom at the Heritage Foundation. Nile, thank you so much for joining us. The news that we're hearing from Greg, does any of this surprise you? I mean, it's obviously early.
No, it's not a surprise. I think that it was widely anticipated that Mr. Macron would be the victor in this race. But having said that, it looks as though it's a sort of 60-40 split according to various sort of Belgian polls that have been conducted. And that is a very significant vote, of course, for Marine Le Pen.
Certainly, I mean, if Greg's reporting comes out to be accurate, I mean, initially we have about 12 million votes. That's far from a defeat for her group.
Yeah, it is a very, very large vote. And I think that if you look at the first round, where you had the anti-establishment candidates polling over 50% in total, actually, there is a groundswell, I think, of discontent, of course, with the political establishment in France. It's going to be, I think, very difficult for Monsieur Macron to actually govern effectively. After all, he is a politician whose party has, at the moment, 0 seats in the French National Assembly. He's also a protege of François Hollande, the current socialist president. And Macron, I think, is going to find it very, very difficult, actually, to turn this country around. I mean, France is an economic basket case at the moment. And neither Macron nor Le Pen really have been offering the kinds of free market economic solutions that are necessary to turn France around.
That sort of brings me to my next question is where does he go from here? As you just mentioned, not only is the country divided, and you said he doesn't have really a voice, how does he go forward?
Well, there are going to be parliamentary elections in June that will be critically important for Macron. But let's not forget, this is a politician who has very little experience. He spent a couple of years.
And how does he separate himself from Hollande? I mean, that is his political experience, really. Like you said, he does have very little experience. The experience that he does is associated with a president who was widely unpopular.
That's right, and I think that it's going to be a huge uphill task for Macron. He's also a man, I think, of little real, strength and resolve. Actually, I mean, he's seen as a very lightweight sort of figure, who's the sort of compromise candidate, I think, for the French people. He has no real vision, I think, for France. And I think in many ways you're going to see just a continuation of the existing status quo. And let's not forget that François Hollande was a hugely unpopular politician. Macron is a product of Hollande's regime. Macron is also a figure who's never in the past been elected to anything at all. He's never really achieved anything. So I can't say the outlook for France looks particularly positive, actually.
Is there any precedent for this? And I ask that in the context of the relationship with the U.S. as well, because there's no really context for what we're seeing in the U.S. as well. I mean, to be fair. So with the relationship between these two superpowers, is there any precedent for this?
I think we're going to see an interesting few years in terms of the Macron-Trump relationship. After all, President Obama endorsed Mr. Macron. And Macron certainly adheres to a sort of Obama-Clinton sort of worldview, very different to that of President Trump. Certainly the United States and France are going to continue working together in key areas, counter-terror cooperation, for example. But I think ideologically there's going to be a lot of division actually between Macron and Trump. These are two figures with extremely different
personalities,
approaches,
if you will.
Yes, and also Macron is a sort of open borders advocate. He's been a big supporter of Angela Merkel's refugee policies, strongly opposed, of course, by President Trump. So I think very, very different visions here. But Macron is really an untested figure. This is a huge leap into the unknown, I think, for France in some respects due to the inexperience of Macron. But at the same time, though, I do think it's a continuation of existing failed socialist policies. And France needs free market policies to turn itself around. And we're simply not seeing that being offered, actually.
Sort of brings me to my last question. There's been so much talk that this is far from a traditional election, one of many elections in recent history that are far from traditional elections, how it really represents nationalism versus globalism. And I'm sort of wondering how this is all going to pan out, because we've seen it, like we said, in other countries, and now we see it in France. And I sort of want to look forward with you at the bigger picture on how this is really all going to fit together, and especially when it comes to, like you said, fighting terrorism.
Yeah, I think without a doubt you are going to see a continuing strong support for nationalism in France, and clearly about 40% of the population have embraced that in this election. And France has deep-rooted problems with regard to the Islamist terror threat, and also problems relating to mass immigration into the country. France is a deeply divided society. It's also a society that is in a state of tremendous fear on many fronts. And I think that you know, the counter-terror issue, the Islamist terror threat is going to be a huge issue for the incoming French administration. And certainly you are going to see, I think, some strong US-French cooperation on that front. But without a doubt, I think that some of the forces that have been driving through this French presidential election, the populist nationalist sentiments, will continue to be strong in the coming years.
I will say it's been fascinating to watch. It was fascinating to watch the debate. It's been fascinating to watch really the polarization. So we're keeping a close eye on today, and the polls close in less than an hour. Thank you so much, Nile.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And stay tuned as Fox News as we bring you around-the-clock coverage of the French presidential election all day today. At 3 p.m. Eastern, we'll have extended coverage of the election.